Charlie Kirk's final steps into a crowded parking lot ended with a single gunshot, a moment that sent the nation into chaos and sparked one of the most relentless manhunts in modern history. Michael Travers, a drifter with a checkered past, was paraded as the killer, until cracks in the case revealed he might only be a pawn in a darker game. And somewhere in the shadows, a nameless assassin with military precision carried out a plan far more calculated than anyone imagined. This is the story of betrayal, conspiracy, and a hunt for the truth that reached higher than anyone dared to believe. The sun was bright when the crowd gathered to see Charlie Kirk step out of the event center. Cameras flashed, supporters cheered, and the sound of voices blended into a wave of excitement. No one expected the day to turn into a nightmare. As Kirk walked toward his vehicle, a sharp crack cut through the noise. The shot was so sudden that most people didn't even realize what had happened at first. Then chaos exploded. People screamed and scattered in every direction, diving behind cars, stumbling over each other, and clutching their children. Kirk collapsed on the pavement, blood spreading across his shirt. Security rushed to him, but it was too late. The man who had been a powerful voice for many was gone in an instant. Panic swept through the area. Witnesses cried out, pointing in different directions, swearing they had seen someone moving fast through the crowd. Some said the shooter was dressed in black. Others insisted it was a man with a cap pulled low over his face. Nothing was certain, and the confusion made everything worse. Police vehicles screamed into the lot within minutes, sirens echoing as officers forced their way through the frightened crowd. Helicopters circled overhead, shining spotlights onto the streets below, hoping to catch sight of the killer. But whoever pulled the trigger had already vanished like smoke. The media storm began before the body was even removed from the scene. Every channel broadcast live images of officers cordoning off the area with yellow tape, reporters shouting updates, and experts speculating about motives. Some said it was political. Others whispered about revenge or a personal vendetta. Conspiracy theories bloomed instantly, spreading across the internet faster than officials could release statements. Everyone demanded answers, but there were none to give. Detectives worked tirelessly, combing the scene for any evidence. Bullet casings, footprints, camera footage, anything that could reveal who had done this. Strangely, nothing useful surfaced. Security cameras caught the moment of panic, but not the shooter. Witnesses contradicted each other so much that their statements blurred into noise. The case was already beginning to feel like a ghost hunt. Still, the pressure from the public was relentless. Someone had killed Charlie Kirk in plain sight, and the nation wanted justice. Within hours, the FBI joined the investigation. They promised to use every resource to track down the assassin. The scale of the manhunt was massive: roadblocks, checkpoints, and searches across multiple states. But with no solid lead, the fear grew that the killer might strike again. For many, the thought of an unknown gunman roaming free was unbearable. Rumors swirled of professional training, of a calculated plan executed with precision. It wasn't just the randomness of violence, it was the feeling that this murder had been planned for months, maybe longer. In the silence that followed the chaos, one truth lingered in everyone's mind. The death of Charlie Kirk wasn't just another crime. It was the beginning of something much darker, a storm that would soon sweep across the nation, pulling secrets into the light and leaving no one untouched. The man they arrested was no stranger to trouble. His name was Michael Travers, a drifter with a record of thefts and bar fights, someone who had spent more time in holding cells than at a steady job. When news broke that the FBI had taken him into custody, many believed the case was closed. His mugshot spread across television screens, his tired eyes and scruffy beard making him look every bit the villain. People wanted a face to blame, and for a brief moment, Travers filled that role. Yet underneath the headlines and public outrage, questions began to bubble. At the time of the shooting, Travers had been spotted near the event grounds. Witnesses claimed he looked nervous, pacing and muttering to himself. A shaky cell phone video even showed him leaving the area just minutes after the shot rang out. To investigators desperate for a lead, it seemed damning. They dragged him into an interrogation room, searching for cracks in his story. He admitted he had been at the scene but swore he never fired a weapon. He said he ran because the crowd panicked, not because he was guilty. His words carried little weight against the wave of suspicion. Behind the scenes, though, things were not lining up. The bullet recovered from Kirk's body was from a high-powered rifle, fired with accuracy that suggested training. Travers, by contrast, had no military experience, no access to expensive weapons, and no history of violence beyond drunken brawls. Forensic teams searched his apartment and his car, but found nothing. No firearm, no ammunition, not even a trace of gunpowder residue. The more they dug, the thinner the case became. Still, with the media demanding answers, officials presented him as the man responsible. Families of victims often describe the hunt for justice as a kind of desperation, and in this case, desperation seemed to have gripped the investigators themselves. Every press conference repeated the same lines. "We have a suspect in custody. The investigation continues." Yet whispers spread among journalists and online communities that Travers was just a scapegoat. Conspiracy forums buzzed with theories that the government knew more than they were admitting. Some even suggested the real shooter was still out there, planning the next move. Inside the jail, Travers grew more frantic. He pleaded with his lawyer, begging him to believe that he was innocent. The lawyer pushed for details: where he had been, who he had spoken to, how he could prove his movements. But Travers' story was fragmented, filled with gaps that only fueled suspicion. He said he had stopped at a diner, but the cameras there weren't working that day. He said he had talked with a stranger, but no one came forward to verify it. His defense looked weak, and prosecutors were already preparing to build their case. Even so, some investigators were uneasy. The pieces didn't fit. They were chasing a man who looked guilty but might not be. Deep inside the evidence room, detectives began re-watching the security footage, frame by frame, searching for something they had missed. In one blurry corner, a shadowed figure moved differently than Travers. The posture, the stride, it suggested another presence entirely. It was small, almost invisible, but it was enough to plant the seed of doubt. If Travers wasn't the assassin, then the real killer was still free, watching, waiting, and possibly ready to strike again. The cracks in the case widened as journalists started to dig beyond the official statements. Independent reporters questioned how a man like Michael Travers could execute such a precise killing. The bullet had struck with surgical accuracy from a distance that demanded skill, yet Travers had no history of training, no ties to sharpshooting, and no evidence linking him to the kind of weapon used. The doubts spread quickly, and soon mainstream outlets were forced to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. Something about this case was wrong. The more they looked into Travers' background, the more ordinary he appeared. He was a petty criminal, a man caught in bad luck, but not the type to orchestrate an assassination that shook the country. While the media dug, investigators quietly chased other threads. Forensic analysts combed through Kirk's emails and phone records, uncovering disturbing details. In the weeks leading up to his death, Kirk had received several cryptic messages from an untraceable number. They contained only short phrases: "It's coming," "You can't hide," and "The end is set." Even more chilling, his computer logs revealed attempts to break into his accounts, though the hackers left no fingerprints. Whoever was behind it had skills far beyond the average stalker. These clues hinted at planning, at someone who had studied Kirk closely and waited for the perfect time to strike. Detectives also discovered unusual financial movements. A series of large, anonymous transfers had been made to accounts connected to private security contractors. The names were buried under layers of shell companies, but the sums were too significant to ignore. One analyst pointed out that the timing of the transfers lined up almost exactly with the threats Kirk had received. The possibility of a hired assassin began to take shape, a theory that explained the precision of the attack and the complete lack of evidence left behind. But proving it would be another battle entirely. Meanwhile, the public began to turn against the official narrative. Protests erupted outside courthouses, demanding Travers's release. Online campaigns spread rapidly, with hashtags accusing the government of framing an innocent man. Supporters of Kirk, still grieving, clashed with those convinced that a cover-up was in motion. The streets became louder, the voices more divided, and the investigation itself seemed on the verge of collapsing under the pressure. Inside the FBI task force, tension grew. Some agents clung to Travers as their lead, unwilling to admit failure. Others argued that focusing on him was a dangerous mistake, a distraction from the real threat. Late nights turned into heated debates, files piled higher, and every clue seemed to open another door instead of closing one. A sense of unease hung over the investigation, as though the killer was always one step ahead, deliberately leaving them chasing shadows. The break came when one young analyst noticed something almost invisible in a piece of surveillance footage. It was taken from a camera across the street minutes before the shooting. In the blur of faces, a tall figure stood still, almost too still, watching Kirk from a distance. The clothing was dark, the cap pulled low, but the stance suggested discipline. Most would have dismissed it as another bystander, yet this figure disappeared before the chaos began. He was there, waiting, and then gone, just like the assassin. For the first time, there was a glimmer of another path. Travers might not have been the man they wanted after all. Somewhere out there, the real killer remained free, hidden in the noise, while investigators struggled to separate truth from illusion. And the deeper they searched, the more it became clear. Kirk's death was not a random act of violence, but the result of a careful design, a web of secrets that stretched far beyond a single gunman. The discovery of the shadowy figure in the footage reignited the investigation. Analysts froze the frame again and again, enhancing every pixel until the image revealed something new, a glimpse of a wrist, as the figure adjusted the strap of a case slung over his shoulder. Etched into the skin was a tattoo, faint but distinct, a pattern that matched records kept on former military contractors. The tattoo was no accident. It marked allegiance to a private group that had disbanded years ago after scandals of corruption and brutality. Many of its members had vanished into the underground, changing names and identities, yet still offering their skills to the highest bidder. The FBI suddenly had a direction, and it pointed toward a killer far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The task force began tracing connections, digging into databases, and scouring classified files. Soon, a name surfaced. A man with a history of covert missions, trained in long-range weapons, and rumored to have disappeared after a contract overseas went wrong. Officially, he no longer existed. Unofficially, whispers placed him in multiple countries, carrying out work for clients who preferred silence. The revelation shifted everything. Travers, once paraded as the assassin, was quietly declared innocent and set to be released. Public outrage swelled again, this time directed at the authorities who had wasted precious weeks chasing the wrong man while the real threat slipped further from reach. But freedom for Travers did not erase the damage done. Trust in the investigation was fractured, and the FBI faced relentless criticism. Still, the discovery of the tattoo gave them something solid, a sliver of truth hidden within a sea of confusion. They pieced together the assassin's past, building a profile that revealed a man of discipline and calculation, someone who studied targets with patience and never struck without reason. He did not kill recklessly. He killed with purpose. That realization chilled investigators, for it meant Kirk's death was part of something larger, not just the whim of a deranged loner. The search widened. Tips poured in from across the country, some genuine, others designed to mislead. Agents raided abandoned warehouses, safe houses, and rural cabins, only to find empty rooms and scattered traces of someone always just out of reach. It became clear that the assassin knew their moves before they made them. Anonymous calls to local police misdirected teams, wasting time. Surveillance on potential hideouts revealed nothing but staged evidence, planted to confuse. Every step closer seemed to confirm that the killer was watching the investigators as carefully as they were hunting him. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. In one of the safe houses hidden beneath floorboards, agents found a notebook filled with coded entries. Once decoded, it revealed details about Kirk's routines, his security team, even his private meetings. The assassin had been observing for months, recording patterns and waiting for weaknesses. More disturbing, the last pages hinted at future targets, with initials and dates that had yet to arrive. Kirk had not been the end game. He had been the beginning. The agents realized they were not simply hunting a man. They were racing against time, trying to prevent another calculated strike. And while they struggled to decode the remaining pages, one question gnawed at everyone involved. Who had hired him, and why? The assassin was not acting alone. He was executing someone else's design, a plan crafted from the shadows with motives that had not yet come to light. The revelation meant the threat was bigger than a single gunman. It was a network, and it was already in motion. The coded notebook sent shockwaves through the task force. What began as the hunt for a single gunman now looked like the unraveling of a wider conspiracy. Analysts worked around the clock to decode the remaining entries, their screens glowing with patterns of numbers and letters that hinted at something sinister. The initials listed alongside future dates didn't point to random victims. They matched the names of influential figures connected to politics, finance, and media, people whose removal could reshape the balance of power. The realization spread through the team like fire. Charlie Kirk's assassination had been the opening move in a much larger game. The assassin himself remained a ghost. Each time a lead emerged, it dissolved into nothing. Phone numbers linked to burner devices, vehicles stolen and abandoned, disguises used only once. He seemed untouchable, always a step ahead. Yet the deeper investigators dug, the more they uncovered threads leading back to Kirk's inner circle. Emails hinted at disagreements, broken alliances, and promises of gain that would follow his death. The unsettling truth was forming, that the assassin was not acting alone, but as part of a carefully orchestrated plan born from betrayal. Pressure mounted as the next date in the notebook drew closer. Security was quietly increased around those suspected to be on the list, though no official warnings were given to avoid panic. Behind closed doors, the FBI debated whether to go public, but fear of mass hysteria kept them silent. Agents were dispatched to stakeouts across the city, watching rooftops, parking garages, and every high vantage point. For days, nothing happened. Then, on the eve of the predicted strike, a sniper nest was discovered overlooking a hotel where one of the listed figures was scheduled to appear. The weapon was gone, but traces left behind confirmed it had been set up. The assassin had been there, ready, but vanished before the trap closed in. The near miss sent a chilling message. The killer wasn't just targeting individuals, he was playing with the investigators, showing them how close he could get without being caught. Morale within the task force wavered. Each failure made the conspiracy feel larger, as though invisible hands were pulling strings to protect the assassin and keep him moving forward. Some agents began to suspect leaks inside their own ranks, betrayals that explained why every lead seemed compromised. Trust eroded, and the fear grew that the killer had allies, even within the investigation. The final breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Forensic analysis of the notebook S paper revealed it had been manufactured in a facility linked to a shell corporation. That corporation, when traced back through layers of false ownership, connected to a consulting firm tied directly to one of Kirk's closest advisors. The betrayal was no longer speculation. It was fact. Kirk had been silenced not by an enemy from the outside, but by someone who had once stood beside him. The assassin was only the blade. The hand that guided him came from within. As the truth surfaced, the nation's horror deepened. The manhunt continued. But now the story was bigger than one killer. It was about power, greed, and the willingness to erase lives to gain control. The assassin remained free, his face hidden, his movements unseen. But the shadow he cast stretched across the country. The case would not close with Kirk's death. Instead, it opened a door to something far darker, a conspiracy still unfolding, with secrets buried deep enough to shake everything if brought to light. The final chapter of the story was not justice. It was the chilling certainty that the storm had only just begun.